Well, good morning, friends, and welcome. This is Casey Gwynn from the National Family Justice Center Alliance, and we're very honored to have you join us today for one of our regular webinars that we broadcast from San Diego, from the home of the Family Justice Center Alliance. So we often have faculty members and speakers and trainers from all over the country join us as experts when we do these webinars, and we're very honored to have Kim Wells joining us today, and I'll introduce her in a few minutes. Kim's the Executive Director of the Corporate Alliance to End Partner Violence, and we're so honored that she's going to be presenting for us today. You'll see on the screen as we get started with our webinar today instructions related to the presentation, including how to access the audio portion of the presentation. When we do webinars at the Family Justice Center Alliance, we do have all attendees muted, but you are able to type questions and send them to us. Melissa Mack, who's running our webinar today, will be getting those questions, and we'll take most of the questions at the end of the presentation, though if something does come up in the middle of the presentation, we may dialogue on it as well there. But please be aware that right from the beginning, you can go ahead and type in your questions and send them to us so that we can then have them for the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. This presentation is recorded, and it will be posted at familyjusticecenter.org. We would ask that you complete the evaluation at the end. It's always helpful for us to have feedback. We have hundreds of people on this webinar today, and so it's great to have the feedback from folks in order to improve our webinars in the future as we go. As I said, my name is Casey Gwynn, and I serve as the president of the Family Justice Center Alliance on behalf of Gail Strack, our CEO, and Melissa Mack, who's running our webinar today, and our whole team at the Family Justice Center Alliance. We're very happy to have you join us. We do want to thank the Verizon Foundation for sponsoring this webinar today. Verizon does amazing work, not just with the Family Justice Center Alliance, but with a host of domestic violence related organizations in the public sector and the private sector all over the United States, and we're very honored to have Verizon's support for this work. Before we get started, we always like to give a shout out for our conference, which is now just 3.5 weeks away. We've got over 400 people so far registered coming to New Orleans April 17 to 19 to join us for the 12th Annual International Family Justice Center Conference, and it's not too late for you to join us. We still have room. We're probably going to be close to 500 people when it's all said and done. Many communities sending teams from a diverse kind of cross-section of their community: police officers, prosecutors, advocates, medical folks. We have a number of judges joining us. We have survivors joining us. We have social service folks and a variety of professionals coming to both get subject matter training around domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, and elder abuse, and then to really look at this whole dynamic of providing services for victims under one roof, multi-agency models that seek to put more and more services together that victims and their children need without them having to go from place to place and agency to agency to get the help they need. You can get information about the International Family Justice Center Conference on our website at familyjusticecenter.org. We do always like to recognize our team, because this isn't about 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people here. It's always a team effort when we do work at the Family Justice Center Alliance, both in the United States, around the world. So we appreciate our small but mighty team, as Gail calls them. And we also always try to recognize our direct services team. Those are members of our staff that work day-to-day in the San Diego Family Justice Center. Lee Friedman and Katie Huerta work in our self-sufficiency program for survivors. Alexia Peters runs our Family Justice Center Legal Network, which is our civil legal services team, and Katie Yamas oversees client services for the Family Justice Center and manages all the intake processes, safety planning, and risk assessment with clients coming into the Family Justice Center. Just as a reminder, as I said, these webinars are recorded, but in order to be able to access them after today, if you want to show them to others, to business leaders in your community, to other members of your Family Justice Center team or your domestic violence agency team or board members or others in the organization that you work with, you do need to be a member of the Alliance in order to access this webinar. It is free to become a member, but you do have to register on our website. We'll send you a username and password within 24 hours, and then you can access the webinar and be able to show it, both the audio and the PowerPoint, to others anytime in the future. We have literally hundreds and hundreds of webinars that we've recorded that are available to you on a host of subjects. We're very honored today to have Kim Wells, the Executive Director of the Corporate Alliance to End Partner Violence, presenting on the topic that we have selected for today, which is using telling Amy's story to engage a Family Justice Center's local business community. And most of you know that Telling Amy's Story is a documentary that was produced by Penn State focusing on the homicide of Amy Homan McGee, who was a former Verizon employee who ended up being killed by her partner. And that, both the 15-minute version of that documentary and the hour-long version have become very significant training and learning and education tools across the United States as the Verizon Foundation has promoted and funded the distribution of Telling Amy's Story. And so one of the things that we're doing is really looking at how to use Telling Amy's Story through family justice centers and domestic violence agencies and other kinds of multi-agency collaboratives to engage the business community. And nobody knows that better than Kim Wells. As I mentioned, Kim is the Executive Director of the Corporate Alliance. She's been doing this work for many years. Kim and I met quite a long time ago, and I was really impressed with her passion, her heart, her commitment to this work and the mission. She serves currently on the National Advisory Board for the Family Justice Center Alliance and on the Advisory Board for the Allstate Foundation Domestic Violence Program. She serves on the Verizon Foundation Domestic Violence Advisory Board and the Workplace Committee of the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence Against Women. Kim's previously been on the American Bar Association Commission on Domestic Violence. She's been a liaison to the American Medical Association. She's been a faculty member in a whole bunch of different organizations and has taught at the college level as well, at Heartland Community College and at Illinois State University. And I have just always been impressed with her real intellect and her real passion for this work both. She's truly a national leader and a national advocate. She speaks not just in the United States but around the world. Kim and I had the opportunity a number of years ago to work together in Amman, Jordan, when we were doing work with the State Department over there, really focusing on how to expand services for victims and their children in a predominantly Muslim country in the Middle East. And so we're so honored to have Kim join us today. Kim, it's all yours, and thank you for presenting with us today.
Thank you, Casey. Let's see if I can move my slides forward. We'll hope for the best here. Let's see. So far, I'm not getting it.
Let me make this happen for you.
All right. Have you turned them over to me?
Yes.
All right.
You should have it.
Come on now. Well, let's see. I'm trying to move it. Doesn't really want to go. Well, I'm going to you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and let Melissa do it because for whatever reason, I'm trying to click the stuff I'm supposed to click, and it's not going.
I'll try now, Kim.
All right. Well, now somebody clicked it for me, and it moved. I am very excited to talk with you guys today. I love the Family Justice Centers. I love the concept. I love the idea, and especially to talk about Telling Amy's Story, which is a story that's very close to my heart and I think can make such a difference in saving lives. Unfortunately, the one thing we can't do today that doesn't work well is because of bandwidth issues on everybody's computers is to be able to show a trailer or a small clip of Telling Amy's Story. So we've got the links, like Casey said, the links are available, and we've even got the links within the PowerPoint so that you can link to them if you haven't already seen Telling Amy's Story. We pulled some screenshots to talk about today, but that is, unfortunately, the one thing that we can't do is to be able to actually show part of the story today. I wish that we could. Gosh, I can't even forward my slides, so far I'm not doing so well on that. Oh, there we go. My objectives today in talking with you are to identify the impacts of domestic violence in the workplace. I think that's important when we're talking, because when you're talking with business, there's really two parts. There's the business case, and then there's the human face. And I think that the beauty of telling Amy's story is because you can talk with the business community about both. So I want to make sure that you're armed with some of that business case and then also that human face. Discussing the role of the Family Justice Center in addressing the issue of domestic violence at the workplace and how you guys can sort of be part of that team. And then examine kind of ideas for those partnerships and maybe what has worked and why this particular documentary is so powerful. You know, there's a lot of tools that you can use. There are a lot of companies and businesses use training videos, and just to kind of talk about what's different about telling Amy's story and why it's been so effective and why it's so powerful. So what is the Corporate Alliance, if you don't already know? A little bit about us. Casey sort of told you. We are the only national nonprofit in the United States founded by businesses themselves with a mission to address domestic violence as a workplace issue, which makes us unique. It's peer-to-peer. It's a business saying to another business, this is our business. Domestic violence is something we should care about. It makes a difference to us business-wise. That's powerful. If you ever, oh, I see. I'm not even doing the magic myself. I think Melissa's doing it for me. It's in a business is enlightened self-interest to address this issue. Just a couple of stats. You know, victims lose nearly 8 million days of paid work a year. That's about 32,000 full-time jobs. So if you think about that, a workplace of 40,000 employees in a year, if they were losing that many work days of cost, they'd be down to 8,000 employees. That's significant. Nearly 5.6 million days of household productivity lost a year because of violence. That's a cost that business cares about, especially in this economy. I mean, I think things are starting to bounce back, but those kind of losses are things that businesses care about. We can go to the next slide now. And I think that the one thing I learned somewhere along in this job is I would talk about, you know, 1 in 3 women worldwide are victims of domestic violence, and about 1 in 4 women in the United States, about 1 in 7 men. And I would see the managers in these businesses looking at me, and I knew what they were thinking. They were thinking, yeah, but those people don't work. I could see it in their faces. So I thought, well, you know what? Let's do a survey and find out how many of those people work, because no one had ever before done a national survey to say how many employed people are victims of domestic violence. So we did, and we found out 21% of full-time employed adults in the United States are victims of domestic violence. You may have heard that stat before, 1 in 5. That comes from us. That was our benchmark survey. 64% of them said that their ability to work was significantly impacted. And what's interesting is we benchmarked that in 2005, did it again in 2007, came up with the same statistics, and that time we did it with Fortune 1500 businesses. Because sometimes businesses would say, well, what about the kind of people who work for us? It's really funny how people, and I'm sure that you know this working in a family justice center, people say, well, that doesn't happen to people like me, and as we all know, it happens to everyone. It's everyone's business. We can go to the next slide. The other interesting part of this, you say, okay, well, fine, that just impacts the victim. Well, domestic violence, as you know, impacts everyone. So we asked coworkers who were involved and said, yes, I knew somebody was a victim who worked with me. How did that impact you? And, you know, 31% said, hey, I felt I had to cover for that person. 38% said, I was concerned for my own safety because I knew that that abuser was scary. 27% said, I felt like I had to do the victim's work, which led to 25% said they resented the coworker due to the situation. And if you look at those statistics, that's a little group of people trying to be their own domestic violence response team. That's people not having a workplace where they can really acknowledge and deal with domestic violence as a workplace issue. And that's where a workplace understanding, the next slide, what the employer's role is, being really important. And this is where you guys being part of this can be vital, because an employer's role really, we have 3, kind of 4 R's, is to recognize that domestic violence is an issue that affects the workplace, respond appropriately in the context of the workplace, refer the employees to the professionals like you and the advocates that can best assist them, and then to reach out to the community resources for partnership, expertise, and support. Because here's the thing, why that relationship with family justice centers is key. Where are those employees going to go for help? Sure, they have employee assistance programs. That's great. They can do a lot of stuff. But when it comes down to the hard kind of services that a victim of domestic violence, a survivor, needs, that is a partnership that's vital. And if you guys aren't there, those employees are not going to have those resources. So making that relationship becomes key. So what's a family justice center's role in all of this? Flexibility. Provide those services and those expertise to the employers regarding domestic violence. You know this stuff. We tell employers all the time, just like if your employee said, I'm ill, the employer's not the doctor. They send the employee to the doctor. If a victim of domestic violence is a victim of domestic violence, the manager doesn't suddenly become a domestic violence expert. You send the person to the people with expertise, and that's the people like you. Be willing to take the role they need as their partner and a community expert and resource. Judicial interface. The employers have no idea what happens in court. We've had employers that have said things in certain states, made policies, and had to rescind them that said, you have to take off of work until your batterer's in jail, thinking that's keeping people safe, not realizing somebody gets bonded out and leaves in 24 hours. So this is where it's appropriate for a family justice center to educate, help an employer understand the process, things like orders of protection, how that actually works, because you have to realize somebody who makes a policy like that has no clue what actually happens in court. And obviously this varies from state to state. Coordination, be a one-stop shop, which obviously beautifully are, of resources for employers and their employees so that the person doesn't have to go to 45 different places. They can go one place to get the help that they need. So you just play that critical role, which leads to how you can use telling Amy's story with employers and their employees. Sort of, I think there's two sides of that. But I think, first of all, when you want to reach out to the employers in your community, telling Amy's story is a great vehicle to start the discussion. It's, you know, it's something real that happened to somebody. It's not a made-up movie. It's great for helping employees, employers, whoever that group is that you're talking to, recognize the signs of domestic violence. And because it is a real story with a real timeline, it brings to light that domestic violence is a community issue because it talks about the entire community. Deidre Fischel, the detective that narrates the story, does such a beautiful job of bringing to light that it's a community issue. And for the workplace, it's a workplace issue. It's a family issue. It's not just a quote-unquote woman's issue or a private matter. It's really and truly everybody's business. And it's so compelling in that way. And Casey sort of touched on this. Next slide. The story behind Amy's story is hosted by Mariska Hargitay and told by Deidre Fischel. It follows the timeline of the domestic violence homicide of Amy Holman McGee that occurred November 8th of 2001. And so her parents, coworkers, law enforcement officers, court personnel share their perspectives on what happened to Amy in the weeks, months, and years leading up to her death. And although we'll never be able to change the ending to Amy's story, which every time I've ever watched it, I want the ending to be different. I think that her mother and her family are amazing to allow us to honor her in this way. We hope that by telling that story and sharing that story with employers and using that story to help them understand what might happen to their employees in their community, we can change that outcome for millions of other people and people who you're serving and people in those workplaces. And telling Amy's story is effective because it shows that evolution of abuse. It shows the types of behavior. It shows the controlling. It shows the fear. It shows things like the person trying to look at a schedule at work, especially things that are instructive for workplaces. It's real. There are those mini interviews with coworkers and friends and family and practitioners and law enforcement people, so that, and none of it's made up. So people can't say, oh, well, that's nice. That's a nice training video. That's not real. So it's meaningful. And those key messages can really be pulled out and discussed at any sort of level that you want to. And it debunks the myths that I was discussing earlier when I was talking about why we sort of did that very first survey about, I guess all those domestic violence victims probably don't work. You know, socioeconomic status, how much education you have, where you live, what you look like, who you are. Domestic violence can happen to anybody. Next slide. And I think then it also is so instructive of why employers and coworkers should pay attention to domestic violence, what they can do, can't do, shouldn't do. And the other thing is, I thought it was really interesting. One of our corporate alliance members is the World Bank, and one of the reasons they thought so much of telling Amy's story was they felt like it was really high quality, and that stuff matters for employers. You know, they like that it's such a high quality piece. That mattered as something they wanted to see and something that they would want to share with their employees because they felt like it was a high quality piece that mattered to them. I think for Verizon specifically, it was interesting. It's not the only workplace story for Verizon, and it's not the only story for any workplace. Sadly, Verizon has had more than Amy, who had, as a person who's passed away as a result of domestic violence. It's a very large workplace. That story is not an aberration for them. And I think it's helpful for you to make sure that employers understand it isn't an aberration in their community either. You are a living, breathing testament as a family justice center that Amy's story isn't an aberration. Someone doesn't have to die for it to be, you know, that's not the proof of domestic violence. What you're doing is trying to make sure that nobody else's story ends that way. So Amy's story isn't an aberration. Amy's story is actually the sad end. And again, why use this when you're talking to businesses? Because it's not fabricated. I can't tell you enough how much more meaningful that seems to be to people. It reaches into their heart. Employees can relate to that story at different levels. She's a survivor. She's a mom. She's a coworker. She's a community member. And it's very, very candid. I mean, I'll give a caveat in a second about that. It's a very touching, meaningful story. And in the caveat, I'll go to the next slide here. It gives, you know, angles from law enforcement, the coworkers, management. Yeah, everybody has their different sort of views that they give on her life. I do want to say, when you're using this, you have to be thoughtful, just like you do with any survivors. You have to assume if 1 in 4 women, 1 in 4 females, 1 in 7 men are survivors, that's true for the people at any workplace that you're talking to. So you've got survivors or people that are victims right there at that workplace. So you have to be ready to prepare and to respond. And if you're pressed for time, you really want to select what you're going to emphasize. But just don't ever forget that this is always real for anybody, anytime that you're talking, even if it's just to connect with the business, because it is part of why it's so powerful is because it's so real. So I wanted just to make sure I note that. I think the other reason that Amy's story is really instructive for people who deal with domestic violence daily, talking to people who don't, is because it's not a single event. And domestic violence, as we all know, is not a single event. It shows that timeline and that it's not just about violence itself. It shows the buildup of how Vincent has gotten more control in Amy's life. And so I think that being able to see that timeline is so instructive for people in a way that you can't manufacture because it's real. I just wanted to also share with you then what have been some of the results of within Verizon, what that they've shared as a result of telling Amy's story. Now, granted, this is within a workplace where this actually happened to the person, but that doesn't make a lot of difference. I mean, it does in some ways. But I would say that our other companies that have used this, you know, State Farm has used it internally. Many of our member companies have used it internally. We've gotten some of this feedback is, you know, similar, of course. None of them can take it quite as personally, but employees really felt they had permission to ask their coworkers if they needed help. They can't ignore the signs. It's almost like by showing the video in the workplace, people felt like then their employer was saying, yes, please ask. It made the employees more aware of available resources and more aware of the policy at Verizon. I think that's powerful because, as you can sort of see, if you start to get an employer engaged at whatever level you engage them at, you are in a position of helping. I always think about when people talk about who do we have at the table in the community, who do we have at the table at the community, they don't think about the power sometimes of the workplace. Everybody wants their cash, which is great, but how important it is at the place a person spends such a large majority of their time to be a resource for victims of domestic violence is amazing. And to just increase the awareness of, if those employers already have a commitment, to strengthen that commitment, to make that partnership with you, I think that would be amazing. Next slide. I think it also shows employees that they're not alone. Verizon found that employees felt like that their employer cared more about them because they were showing them this video and doing this kind of response. And so then I kind of wanted to spend some time talking to you about if you're going to sort of do this as an external person saying, we'd like to share this with you as an employer. Here's some sort of, I think, ideas. I want to spend time, definitely talking and answering questions, but I think engaging employers with this video. First of all, I think you want to spend a lot of time thinking about letting them know why you're conducting the session. If your backstory is because you want to engage with them, then that's your backstory, but you want to make it real and relevant. I think that you wanted, as I said before, you want to make sure that you guys have your experts there. You are the experts, but you have to be ready for people to disclose or people to need help. There or afterwards, not just that you're instructing them about the FJC, but realizing those people themselves may need help or have family members that need help. Those discussions, as you know, just like with people that you serve, can get very emotional. So it's very important that you're ready for that and know what you want them to do next. That should say employers, I'm sorry, not employees. What the next steps are that you want to have as a result of telling Amy's story. And then I think, more objectives of how many employers do you want to reach? Do you already have employers in mind? Sometimes going through a local Society of Human Resource Management is a great way to do it. Sometimes your local Chamber of Commerce is a great way to do it. Sometimes it's, a couple of employers at a time that are already involved with you. It may be one employer at a time with just their management level people. It just sort of depends. So sort of having a game plan for that. You want to sort of have a toolkit and a standard agenda so that if you are working with those managers, they've got everything so they can sort of roll it out in their own workplace. You want a welcoming environment because it is, you know this from dealing with domestic violence. It's uncomfortable. I think that, once again, being able to explain to people that this was a PBS-created documentary. It's about a person who lived and about being able to create hope and be able to change the ending, and that you guys are such an important part of being able to change that ending is a great way to go, as one suggested perhaps way of framing this. So I think that that's one way that you might want to think about that, and then also making sure that you think about those human-face business case statistics. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the Family Justice Center as part of the team. If you sort of look at that, what we call a domestic violence response team at a workplace, where they have security, employee relations, human resources, their legal people, their on-site managers, their employee assistance program, community resources, and Family Justice Center. It was hard to spell out because it's a tiny little circle. You guys could be such an important part of that team, that disciplinary response team, where if there's a domestic violence situation or a case that they're dealing with, or they want more information, or they want to learn how to deal with it, you guys could really engage and be part of that team. And I think personally, the way that I see that, you're subject matter experts. You know so much, and depending on what part of the Family Justice Center you're coming from, because you've got so many people under your roof, and depending on what Family Justice Center it is, you've got rich subject matter experts that can really help the business or the employer. You're a community resource for the survivors or for their employees. You're a connector to other resources. You're an interface with the judicial system. You're also a place where employees can actually volunteer. So I think, and I'm sure you guys have all learned this, sometimes people aren't ready to actually address domestic violence. Could actually be an issue there they have to deal with, but they're ready to volunteer. So you're a connector there, and I think that you can think yourself about all what the other possibilities might be for that kind of interface. But I think that you have such rich connecting possibilities with the business to make yourselves invaluable, and you are invaluable, but to help them understand that you are more than a place for them to donate supplies, that you are just a rich partner. I also want to say, then, so if you want to get on the team, I always have to make this plug. You want to make sure that you have your own domestic violence in the workplace policy first. I'm always amazed, and maybe I'm preaching to the choir, and what is it, 139 people on the phone, and the webinar already have this, but oftentimes when I'm speaking with people and they're very excited to go to businesses and talk about domestic violence, and I say, that's great, you guys already have your own policy? No. Well, if we're going to walk our talk as service providers, we need to walk our talk and be the first people to have a domestic violence in the workplace policy and program and resources, especially since statistically it's really hard for our employees to come forward because they're working in the service field themselves. So I would really encourage you to make sure that you have a great policy, great program, great resources for your own employees first. And then become a partner to the employer, and help that employer understand the value of what you can do for them, sort of what I was saying before, that you are such a rich resource and so valuable. And then you're that connecting point for them. And then I think Melissa's going to text chat you and ask you this question. I'm just very curious to know, can you see using telling Amy's story with local businesses in sort of the way that I talked about? Because I'm just very curious to see, I mean, and we can have lots of questions about this, if this is something that you can see working for you. Because I do see that it is a very powerful tool. So I'm going to give Melissa time to ask that. Then I wanted to make sure these resources, 15-minute trailer, or the trailer, 15-minute documentary. You can request a DVD if you haven't already, and Casey may know the answer to this and I don't. You guys may have special access to the DVD that I don't even know about. But if you don't, you can request it through the Verizon Foundation. And then finally, I always want to make sure at the end of things, before we get to questions, that we honor, that's Amy. And again, while we can't change Amy's story, I know that Amy's story can change other stories, and that to me is the thing that matters the most. That's why I'm here every day. That's why we do what we do, because we want to change the end of the end of other stories when we couldn't change the end of Amy's story. And we do this in honor of Amy and all the other victims who have not survived, and the victims who live, and the survivors who have a voice, and the survivors who don't yet have a voice that you speak for, and that this documentary speaks for, and that I hope that the Corporate Alliance is able to help speak for, and that's why we are doing this. And then I also just wanted to give our contact information here at the Corporate Alliance so that you can have that, and our blog and my email. And if you don't have a domestic violence in the workplace policy and don't know how to set up a program, that stuff's on our website, so you're good to go there. And then I guess I'm ready for questions and discussion, because I really want to know if people feel like this will work for them, or what kinds of questions people have to kind of set this up and get this going.
Well, Kim, thank you very much. This is great, and it's a great beginning to a dialogue. We're already getting a lot of positive feedback from folks saying that they do really believe that they can use it in their agency.
Good.
We have a lot of community-based domestic violence and sexual assault organizations on the phone, along with quite a few folks from partner agencies and family justice centers. There's a number of kind of questions and comments. I will just respond to one of the issues, which was kind of what's the role of the Family Justice Center Alliance kind of in this relationship with the corporate alliance. And obviously, we're really allied or partner agencies, one, because we just always like agencies that have the word alliance in their name. And we think we should be friends with people that are call themselves an alliance. But seriously, our real focus is a partnership with you and with the Verizon Foundation in this. We are developing a pilot project in Tarrant County, Texas, with the One Safe Place Family Justice Center that has just opened and is in the middle of a $12 million capital campaign on the campus they're developing there under the leadership of Ken Shetter and the Safe City Commission and their director, Michelle Morgan, and a great deal of support from the Bass Family Foundation and John Joyce and Joel Glenn and the whole team at the Bass Family Foundation. And we're looking at how they are going to kind of roll out the Telling Amy's Story piece connected to a family justice center, and then really see how that integrates the business community. What we've seen going on in Fort Worth, Texas over the last couple of years is just nothing short of stunning, to see the way all of these agencies, community-based agencies, government-based agencies, have come together to develop the One Safe Place Family Justice Center model there that we'll actually be profiling next year at our international conference when we'll be in Fort Worth, Texas next April. We're in New Orleans this year and in Texas next year. But we're really excited about developing a toolkit with Fort Worth to really figure this out step by step. But we know that a lot of family justice centers have already shown Telling Amy's Story. They've already put it out there. But one of the things, we've gotten some questions about this that I kind of wanted to ask you about is this whole kind of question about, do you think that Family Justice Center folks should be going with the showing of Telling Amy's Story? Should they try to have someone there? Should they be inviting business people into the Family Justice Center? My reaction is all of the above, but
yes.
I kind of love your thoughts on what you think that looks like.
I think that looks different depending on where you work and live. And I think that whatever works, you should do. I think if they invite you into the business, you should go. I think if they will come to the Family Justice Center, you should do that. I think that if you can go to the Chamber of Commerce and do this, you should do that. Mm-hmm. I think that whatever you can do to best engage, and it may depend very much on where you work and live. So I think that whatever, and I'm hopeful that you may have one test case business that is friendly to you, or that you can kind of run things by in your community that can help you build a little momentum around this, to say, can you be our little test on this? We want to kind of run this by you to see what you think about this. But I do think all of the above. I think that the one thing is, don't ever get disappointed, and don't ever, and you guys all know this because you work in this field, don't ever get disappointed. I think if there's 3 in a room, that's the power of 3, and those are the 3 that are supposed to be there. So don't ever, because there's a reason those 3 are in the room. But I do think that if you can build some critical mass, if you have a community that's friendly to if you can engage in a larger N through some of those groups to get a little mass, that's great. I think you might want to test that out first with a business that you might, or an employer that you might be more friendly with, to see what works with them.
Yeah, that's good. A number of people have asked about using it in the faith community or church setting, and whether you think Telling Amy's Story is something that should be promoted to be used and shown for dialogue and discussion in the faith community. Quite a number of people actually have asked about that.
I don't see a reason why it would not be beneficial in the faith community, although the faith community is not necessarily specifically addressed in telling Amy's story. This is, you know, and our thing is the workplace. You know, I'll give my disclaimer here. I am definitely a person of faith. If you can get into the faith community, yay. And if because I think that it is such a compelling piece, and because I think that people can so much identify with Amy, I absolutely think that if a faith community invites you in and is interested in viewing this with you, go for it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There's a number of questions about kind of the exact uses of it, and I will just comment that I think that you can use Telling Amy's Story, either the full version or the short version, for just general domestic violence awareness education, but I think you can also use it to educate the community about high-risk domestic violence situations. Amy Holman McGee was in a high-risk situation. She would have scored in extreme danger on Jackie Campbell's danger assessment. And we, in the Family Justice Center Alliance world, are focusing a lot in what we're doing with the Verizon Foundation around Telling Amy's Story on this high-risk piece. We really believe that most domestic violence homicides are predictable. The vast majority are predictable. And if something is predictable, then it's preventable. It's only a question of resources and priorities.
Well, and it's
know something's going to happen, or you can predict it. You can do something about it if you really want to, and that obviously we think is a good topic of discussion.
Especially when you recognize the predictability, when you're able to see, and one of the backwards heartbreaking things about Telling Amy's Story, and when you do some of those sort of cases, is when you look at the ticks, but someone has to see the ticks. And I think that I'm going to say two things about that, especially with employers. While that is an important topic of discussion, it's very important for employers to understand that not everybody's situation is Amy's, because sometimes it's easy for people to say, well, that's never going to happen here. And as long as you say that's never going to happen here, then you think you don't ever have to do anything about it. And for people to understand, wow, maybe you've never had anyone die. I can guarantee you've had somebody with some of these things. And the other thing I want to say about it, so you don't want it to get to this predictable, terrible outcome. With workplaces and threat assessment, we talk about it. We want to get this at 2 and not 10, because that's better for everybody in our community. You know, we want a healthy, safe community for everybody to work and live in. The other thing I want to say about Telling Amy's Story is the beauty of the 15-minute is it's still great. It's still great, and it's perfect for a workplace that says, hey, I don't have that much time. You can show them that 15 minutes, and you haven't lost anything. So I wanted to make sure that I said that.
No, I think that's a great point. Quite a number of people are asking us to talk a little bit more about how you can get the video. We have 500 copies of it at the Family Justice Center Alliance that the Verizon Foundation provided to us.
Great.
We will send it to anyone that requests it. You can email us off of our website at familyjusticecenter.org or .com. We provide copies to family justice centers, to partner agencies in family justice centers, to community-based organizations that are trying to do multidisciplinary and multi-agency work. We're also going to be providing copies to all the attendees at the International Family Justice Center Conference in New Orleans here in a few weeks. And the DVD has both the 15-minute version and the hour-long version. And I would just echo what Kim said. There are a lot of folks that will say we can't spend an hour on this and then have a discussion. Start with the 15-minute version. Show them the 15-minute version and have a discussion about it. I do think the discussion piece is important, just as on the national version of this. We saw Cheryl Cates and the National Hotline team discuss this with Marissa Hargitay and others and other professionals, and I think it's important to have that discussion once it's shown. So one of the things we're talking about with Fort Worth is they're going to kind of set up dialogue after this and have statements about it, and you don't want to show it and have the end of it simply be, okay, so that's a really sad story.
No, and I'm sorry I didn't, yes, I agree, and I'm sorry that I didn't highlight that more when I said you want to have that agenda and that toolkit and have that standardized, because it's really important that you do have a discussion afterwards and that you do have that sort of how do I want to say that, codified.
And I think personalized to your community. I mean,
Yes.
We're obviously great supporters. Kim and I both are, and the alliances of the National Domestic Violence Hotline and their work, but you don't want to just put out a national number when you're showing this in your local community. You want local people to know what you're doing and what they would do and who they reach out to, and if you have a family justice center, what that does and what it looks like. And if you don't have a multi-agency model, service model like a family justice center, who are the people that you want businesses to reach out to?
Absolutely. And who is there for their employees? Absolutely, because they, trust me, we see it all the time because of our connecting that we do for and with our workplaces that we work with every day to make sure that they are able to connect with those local organizations, because that's their go-to in those places where their employees work and live.
Kim, we've gotten quite a few questions about this issue about you giving us a sense, have you seen or heard of any challenges in telling Amy's story? Do businesses, are they reluctant to engage in the conversation when you reach out to them? And people trying to anticipate the obstacles. Do you have people that don't pay attention or don't respond when you try to reach out to them to show it or engage the business community? So there's a number of questions like that if you've got any kind of feedback for people.
We have, it's a little easier for us because we have this built-in sort of choir that always wants things like this. The end of the business world that I am dealing with wants things like this. So in a way, I would liken that to the rest of my life, where I'm trying to tell the rest of the business world that domestic violence really matters and they should do something about it. And there's a lot of those people I never hear from, but then there's always somebody new that I do. So I would say that what's different about this is compelling, and if you can find a setting where it's compelling, but they're not thinking you're going to hit them up for something, or they're not thinking that you're scaring them. I think that's helpful. The other thing I wanted to say, that, and I think this is really instructive and interesting, telling Amy's story is not multicultural. It's extremely white. And we were concerned that that would be a barrier in some of our workplaces. And interestingly enough, the feedback that we got was that that actually wasn't a barrier. It sort of, because the story was so compelling, and the fact was the folks that this happened to were not people of color, so they were white. It was sort of colorblinded. So that would be the only potential caution that I would say, is because it is an all very white cast of people. But that didn't, and that was a concern that we had, but it was not a barrier.
Yeah, I would just echo that. We got some comments like that as well, both showing it among Family Justice Center partner agencies and showing it to some of our businesses that support the San Diego Family Justice Center. And it was interesting because a number of people responded that they had in their heart of hearts a real bias or kind of a belief that this was really about communities of color, and that most domestic violence was perpetrated in communities of color. And it challenged the very biases that our business leaders kind of had sitting there watching it, that this wasn't that. We weren't just showing it. And obviously we know that it spans all communities and all socioeconomic groups, but I actually kind of like it in that way, is that it challenges those very myths and biases.
And that's true. We were concerned that because it was so sort of, but because it's so purely the person's story, that for our workplaces that are very diverse, it did not bother people.
A number of people have asked about kind of the ways to show it and the frequency of showing it. I know that on the national level, the Verizon Foundation has really pushed hard to see it get out on public television stations across the country. We've had some challenges just in our local PBS market getting that out there, but we just distribute it in a variety of other ways. One of the things we're talking about with Tarrant County, Texas, is they're looking at all of their government-owned television stations. They have city governments that have television stations. They have county government that has television stations besides local public broadcasting stations. And we actually just had a conference call with the One Safe Place Tarrant County Family Justice Center team about this. And they talked about literally using the 15-minute version and showing it multiple times on local access television.
Well, I was going to say local access television is like a perfect idea. Yeah.
Again, with resources on the back end and with local phone numbers and local contact.
Well, I think especially if what you could get your local access television to do is to produce that part. So they do a 30-minute, and 15 minutes is the 15-minute, and then the next 15-minute is the local resources discussing it, and that's what rolls. That would be beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's a great combination. A number of people have asked about how you think you engage the business community after you show it, kind of the so what? How do you get it to be an ongoing, if this is going to be a vehicle for family justice centers or other types of domestic violence collaboratives to show it, then what do you want to ask them to do, if you will, that keeps them engaged with you, that keeps a relationship evolving or developing?
And then that's what I guess I would sort of throw that question back to the people listening when in the planning is sort of what is it that you do want them to do? Do you want them, I mean, why are you showing it to them? I'm sort of asking you. Is it because you want to say to them, hey, we'd like you to can we then make sure that our resources are available to your employees? Can our brochures be, are there, before you go in there, do you have an idea of like 5 big dream things you'd like to happen with a particular employer? Do you want to keep a conversation going? But I think it would be really more concrete things like, is there some way that that you can make sure that their employees are getting your information? Because if the idea truly is, or is it volunteers, is it, these 5 different things that you have in your mind? Because I think, I guess I'm going to put the question back to you and say, what is it that you want to get out of this? Because to me, it's that partnership engagement, those sort of things that I talked about at the beginning, where you have the capability of providing them resources, even if it's speaking further to managers about DV 101 so that they understand more of the cycle of violence, because even talking, even showing that 15 minutes of the story might really start to engage them, and they may want to know more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that really sort of thinking through those things, and because there's now 130 of you on here, I'm guessing that those different things are different for each of you. And you may be at different places with what you offer. And if some of you are DV places and some of you are sexual assault places, the coolest things that I see some companies doing, I mean, State Farm has had, sexual assault in her shoes, actual simulations in their atriums because of these relationships they've built with local sexual assault programs. That's an amazing thing to happen for a pretty conservative company.
Mm-hmm.
Those things happen through building those kind of local relationships. Having the clothesline project in your atrium, things that happen because you build those relationships. But those only happen after you build those relationships. So I think that you sort of have to think about what things you think you want to happen as an outcome.
Well, and just to echo that, we have another project we're working on with the Verizon Foundation around their national campaign to engage men to stop violence against women and girls. And we just did a men's leadership breakfast up in Nampa, Idaho with the Nampa Family Justice Center and Rebecca Lovelace. And Ted Bunch came in from A Call to Men and did an amazing job with a group of 70 business leaders, predominantly men. And one of the things that we made a specific point of was coming up with an action list of very specific asks, both big and small, that we wanted people to commit to do after they left the event and follow up to the event. And then we actually asked them to identify publicly which ones they were going to do. And I think that's an important piece. You've got to make the ask, and you've got to have it be very specific. You can't just say, hey, we just want you to be more aware now, and we want you to spread the word. You've got to come up with a very specific set of things you want, whether it's follow-up training with their employees, whether it's inviting their employees to take a tour of your Family Justice Center, to engage them more, whether it's specific things you want them to put in a brochure that goes out to employees, or links that go out in an email notice to employees.
Or their intranet or whatever it is, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think those are very specific things. And I do think, just to echo something you said, Kim, I do think that you also need to dream big enough to ask them to do some big things. I don't think just little tiny things are enough. I love Abraham Lincoln biographies, and one of the biographies of Abraham Lincoln talks about him coming back from church one Sunday during the Civil War, and he said to his wife Mary, well, the sermon was on the battle that we're in, the Civil War, what's going on in the country right now. And Mary Lincoln said, how was the sermon? And he said, it was terrible. And she said, well, was the delivery good? And he said, the delivery was great. And she said, well, did he have good stories? Yes, he had great stories. Well, did he speak from the Bible? Yes, he spoke from the Bible. Then what was so terrible? And Abraham Lincoln said it was terrible because he didn't ask us to do something great. He didn't challenge us to do something that would make a difference. And I really believe that that is something that we're sometimes reluctant to ask much of the business community to do, because we're afraid they're going to say no. So we don't ask them to do anything big enough to really matter.
Well, and I think that telling Amy's story is, again, so compelling, because what you're saying is, we're asking you to help us change the ending for other people. We can't change the ending for this person. Join us in changing the ending for other people. Mm-hmm. And that's really compelling. I mean, if you need something to compel you for big because it's too hard for you to be big on your own, that's compelling. Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's truthful, you know, and there's nothing like the truth to compel you. Mm-hmm. And so I think that and then to be able to say, and here's the ways that you can help us join us in changing the ending for other people, or however you want to craft that message.
Yeah.
And it's a truthful message.
Yeah. A number of people are asking kind of the very practical questions. So you've got a DV agency or a Family Justice Center or Family Advocacy Center or a group of agencies doing this work. They've heard this webinar. They're excited. They either have the DVD or they want to get the DVD from us and then use it. But they're asking kind of practical questions. So how do you even start the conversation? Is it a phone call to a particular business? Is it some kind of specific outreach? But how do you even start that effort? If you have picked 5 businesses, is it a phone call? Is it asking for an in-person meeting? Kind of your thoughts about the very beginning of starting the conversation with some local business.
I think that you start with who you know. I think you always start with who you know. If you know somebody, you always start with who you know, because that's your in. And if that's a phone call and then that's an in-person meeting, I think an in-person meeting is always really good, because it's really hard for people to tell you no when they see your face and they know you've done, and to introduce yourself and to talk about this. And I think that, again, I'm going to go back to this idea of whether that be the local business itself or it be the local Chamber of Commerce, so that you say, can I do this presentation? Is it possible for us to do this with the local chamber members? Because then you're getting some, breadth with people, or with the local, human resource council or whatever that is. And I think that obviously you can't just show up at somebody's door. That's a little hard to do. But, a phone call leading to an in-person meeting, absolutely. And then go.
Well, and I would echo that with a whole bunch of other entities. Don't forget that every Lions Club and every Rotary Club and every Kiwanis Club, they are looking for speakers every week. They're in your community. They meet at least once a month. They're always looking for speakers, and usually some organization every week is having meetings. They're dying for speakers, and you come with information about telling Amy's story. You come and play the 15-minute version and talk about it. I guarantee you that you'll win an ally. And I'm with Kim. You make one ally. They can then endorse it to others. That's certainly what we did. I spoke at the North County Chamber of Commerce here in San Diego County this last year, and you've got 30 businesses sitting in the room when I'm talking. and they are engaging. And lo and behold, the first people that came up to me were people who had dealt with employees who are victims of domestic violence in their workplace, and they all have them. And it was very difficult for them, and one of them ended up getting a workplace restraining order, and then that was complex, and the victim was very emotional and had a tough time kind of trying to say no to the offender, and yet he was coming to the workplace, and that was our end, was that just putting it out there, because if this is really true, and it is, that so many people are impacted by this, many of the businesses you're going to be reaching out to, they actually do have this issue already.
Yep. And also, economic development councils, anybody like that. But also, don't forget, you have all these people that are board members and advisory people, and whoever it is that you work with, they work somewhere. That if they don't work at the place you work at, they work somewhere.
Yeah.
And they are a great resource for you to help you get into their workplace,
Yeah. A number of people keep asking about access to the video. We put that up. I can put up Kim's information here just one more time about how you can access it to link right off of YouTube. And there's a dot there that shouldn't be there in YouTube. But it is accessible on YouTube. And as I mentioned earlier, you can email us at info@nfjca.org. That's info@nfjca.org. and request a copy or copies of Telling Amy's Story of the DVD that the Verizon Foundation has made available to us. And we will send you a copy. As Kim mentioned, you can also request it directly from the Verizon Foundation off of their website. So it is accessible to you. We actually have the YouTube version linked on our website right now, the 15-minute piece linked on our website. And that's a link, by the way, that every partner agency in a family justice center can and should have on their website. Should have a widget that has a graphic that's available. You can download that graphic, or any IT person or 9-year-olds can make you a widget for Telling Amy's Story, or pull a widget off of existing pages and then post it on your website. So all of that is available to you. And I do, again, want to put up Kim's a website address, because there's a lot of great resources on the Corporate Alliance website about the impacts of domestic violence and the cost of domestic violence in the workplace, and that is often the beginning of the conversation, Kim. I know you have a lot of resources that people can access, right?
Yeah. Again, that business case, human face, we've really learned that you need both. If you want to talk to an employer, they're very interested in the statistics, but that all is meaningful without that, not is meaningful without that human face. And when you are able then to sort of bring that human face in, I mean, when you have survivors, you can do that as well. But when you're able to do it with something like Telling Amy's Story, that's really compelling.
Well, Kim, thank you very much for doing this webinar. We've gotten a lot of questions. I think we've touched on all of them. I've tried to bundle some of the questions into particular categories. If you need more information, you can, of course, reach out to Kim. You can also reach out to the Family Justice Center Alliance. Kim, I just want to say thank you. Great job today. You're a great friend and ally, and we just appreciate your national and international leadership in this work, and all of your corporate partners that do such incredible work. Thank you for doing this with us today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope that people are able to get excited about the possibilities of this really beautiful documentary to be able to really change that ending for other people.
Well, thank you very much. Just a couple quick announcements as we wrap up today. My staff just informed me that the Intercontinental Hotel, which is the main hotel for the International Family Justice Center Conference, has just sold out. We have the whole hotel, and it has just sold out. So we are going to have a hotel very nearby, easily within walking distance. We're just negotiating that contract right now. So look for an announcement on our website about the Overflow Hotel for the Family Justice Center Conference. I do want to mention, because I've used some of Kim's material and resources from the Corporate Alliance in Dream Big, Gail Strack and I have a book that talks about the business case for dealing with domestic violence and the cost of taxpayers and the cost of the business community, and our book about the Family Justice Center movement, which you can access at Amazon or any of the online bookstores, or you can buy it on our website at familyjusticecenter.org or .com. And we want to thank you all for participating in this presentation. I'm absolutely convinced that the work of the domestic violence movement over the last 20 years is why we've seen substantial declines in domestic violence homicides in America in the last 20 years. But we're not done yet. We still have 1,200 plus women dying every year in this country. We have men dying, we have children dying, we have police officers dying, we have friends and family members and neighbors dying in the crossfire of domestic violence. And we have a lot more work to do. And the Verizon Foundation and Penn State University and the Corporate Alliance to End Partner Violence have given us a great tool in telling Amy's story and the information we can challenge people with from telling Amy's story. And we look forward to hearing about what you do with it. You'll get a survey at the end of this about the webinar. We'd love to hear about what you are doing or are going to do based on this webinar. We'd love that feedback. And if we can assist you in any way, please feel free to contact us directly off our website at familyjusticecenter.com. I want to thank Melissa Mack for organizing our webinar today and hosting it. Thank you, Kim Wells, for your presentation and your challenge to all of us. And blessings on all of you for the work you do. So thank you, Kim, very much for being with us.